Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever part of the world we are finding you in today. Welcome to the very first edition of the Abelian Podcast. We thought, what better way to start things off today than with the man that started everything himself, the man, the myth, the legend.
Thank you so much, Jake. My name is Bryan Hasler. I'm the CEO and founder of Abelian, and I also have 16 Salesforce certifications. So very excited to be here and really to go into Agentforce today.
Jake from Abelian here. I am a business account executive. I focus on existing and future partnerships, and happy to be here today.
Thank you, Jake.
So when we were kind of talking about this first episode, I asked you, Bryan, there's so many things we can talk about when it comes to the world of Salesforce, different type of work that Abelian's done over the course of the better part of the last decade, I guess. And you pinpointed Salesforce Agentforce 2.0. And yes, we're talking 2.0. Obviously now, 1.0 has been named. So I'd love to spend some time with you today talking a little bit about, how it works, why it matters, who is it right for? Is it best for public sector, private sector? Is it, the larger orgs, the smaller orgs? Is it every one of them, everywhere and in between?
Well, of course. I mean, really, to kind of go into Agentforce, right? It's pretty powerful what is happening. So kind of looking at it, right? Like what you're having is that really a lot of times AI was more going to be, hey, ChatGPT, where you have like something that's responding back to you. It's going to be like a chat robot. And it was really cool when that came out, but it wasn't quite as functional. So you get a lot of answers, a lot of recommendations that help you write emails, other things, but it wasn't actually performing work for you, right? You couldn't actually have it create tasks or maybe like send the email for you or actually do work. It was really cool seeing the functionality of it. So now Agentforce 2.0, it's actually able to do that. So it's almost like, especially for a small business, if you hired someone on your team and they were going to do, let's say, BDR work, where they're actually going to be sending out emails, getting responses back, listening to what the customer says, and helping them out. So it's actually taking action now in the real world, which before it was more just kind of, it was getting better and better and more intelligent, but still is, at the end of it, just more chatting back and forth. And it's not only that too, it has a lot of applications, but really, especially for, larger businesses, they're gonna love this as well, but especially smaller businesses, 10, 50, 100 people, this is what allows you to really scale up. And, a lot of times as a small business owner, you don't have someone that's gonna fill all those hats, maybe not even full time. So this can actually help you with that scaling, especially.
That's really interesting that you mentioned it from the ownership standpoint. Obviously, you take you're looking through that lens as a CEO founder yourself. From what I understand, this not only benefits the owner in being able to figure out what's the most efficient way that I can run my business today with the level of capital that I have, the amount of folks that I have in seat. What's basically the best way to where I can take my top tier representative over here, Sally, and connect her with all the tier one tasks and lead the mundane to somebody that is essentially a AI agent, right? So what I understand this as, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bryan, is this applies not only just to the owners and the benefits from the actual folks that are in seat there, not necessarily replacing them, but putting more of the high priority tasks on their plate. What I'm also understanding is outside of just the customer service aspect that we just talked about, the sales and lead nurturing side, there's also some applications once we get down to, say, marketing. Would you be open to talking a little bit more about that in terms of how it can help with, say, marketing campaigns or data analysis and reporting?
Yeah, of course. So, let's say that you are sending a lot of outbound leads, right? And you are trying to, maybe you send like 500 leads, like emails out to leads. So
Sure.
What it can do is actually, if anyone responds back, if they have questions, it can take those and actually look at your organization and see what knowledge articles you might have inside of Salesforce and send out that information. It's not even going to send the article. It can actually review what you've written about, let's say, a certain product, and send that to them like, this is how this works. This is what if you allow that to, what we typically price it at even as well. So it's really, really powerful. And that's a big thing as well too. It's the reason that people didn't like a lot of chatbots in the past, right, is because you wouldn't really get an answer. It's more, you knew it was just basically trying to segment you to avoid getting a live person, or just trying to basically give you this like information but not really taking any action. So this can actually take action, and actually when you email them back, it'll actually say, hey, it'll typically be this price, or usually this is what this solution is a tailor fit for. So it's actually taking action. And then if it does want to connect you with someone, let's say a sales account representative or someone else, maybe an expert, it'll actually schedule that meeting together coordinate with them both. So it's really, really powerful. It really acts as a very, very powerful assistant, I would say, on that piece.
That's interesting. I didn't know about that part. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So when it comes down to, let's say I'm a sales representative or even customer service representative, we can wear both hats here for this example. If I have, a little bit of information that I've wrote about a specific one of my products or my features that I have, let's say, I might be a company that services different refrigeration devices or, different kitchen devices and outlets there. And, there might be a whole learning curve there with the way that all these devices have, basically become smart overnight, right? I can watch Netflix on my fridge today.
Don't do that you too much, by the way.
That's an interesting part of it. And, I want to talk a little bit more about that as far as, what Agentforce 2.0 is really designed to do. In the past, it sounded like we had routine things, you would initially set it up and program it. Part of what the community is saying on the side of how much configuration it takes, obviously we're going to talk about today before we leave of what the ease of implementation looks like for different sizes of orgs, and ultimately, what type of investment that would be from a time, financial, et cetera. The financial piece is a little bit tricky based on, different configurations of different orgs. So, we'll be a little bit more limited on that side, but definitely open to follow-up questions there for anyone. But before getting into that, for Agentforce 2.0, I want to hear more about if I wanted to select a piece of information from one of these different knowledge articles, and I want to get that into an email format and send that back out to somebody through AI. How does that work today? Like, does it generate the email for me on my own, or?
Yeah. So essentially what it'll do is that when you basically first create your Agentforce and your agent, you actually select and say, would you like it to access these knowledge articles? So it knows what information it should pull and it basically share with the client. That way you're not sending anything kind of confidential. So as long as you have that in there, it'll read it and summarize it in basically its own words and send that out. So it's pretty powerful in how it can do that.
So I'm LG, I'm Samsung, I'm looking to help somebody figure out how they can watch Gordon Ramsay as they're prepping their own meal, right? Right there through the fridge or the device to where you're able to do that. These different knowledge articles, if I were to submit some type of support case or ticket or a phone call, what you're saying is I would get a message back virtually simultaneously.
Yeah, exactly.
After
it'll be
submitting.
unique too. It's not going to be just like a robotic, like, hey, this is like a text, hey, first name, last name. It's going to actually summarize your problem and say, this is how you can do it. So it's always going to thrill them, right? Because that's why people don't like automated responses, because it doesn't really mean anything. It's just like a placeholder. This is actually solving your problem, which is going to be so much better.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And we all felt that way, right? We call into companies today, we say, if we could just get a live person.
Exactly. Because they can't
or
solve your
somebody
problems.
that just understands my unique situation that might fit a subset that's similar with other folks from the past, and I'm getting kind of hammered over the head with the exact same message that they've coded.
Yeah.
We've now grown to a level to where we can recognize different elements of a message. And what I'm hearing is there's just a whole lot more personalization today.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want good customer experience, you want to have this. The other option, I know companies that do this, they have to staff a huge amount of people, and basically they might just be sitting there, frankly. And then they have to handle that volume and then actually send out all the responses. But this is a way you can basically, I think, utilize your team best, because I don't think people go into the office and want to focus on crafting email responses. They want to actually help people, right? Yeah. So this way you kind of like break up that work and allow people to really work and in tandem with AI, but with something they enjoy, which I think brings out the best in people too.
With these types of technologies today, we're basically plugging in criteria A through D and making sure that every single one of those boxes are checked. And we can also deliver it in a certain type of tone too, right? Similar to some of these other GPT engines out there.
Yeah, and just to go into kind of what you're saying as well. So when we first set it up, essentially what I do is I go down and basically say, hey, these are the actions you can take, basically. Because you want it's almost like when you're training a new employee, you want to let them know what their job is, right? It's not that you can just do anything no matter what, right? You don't want to sign a contract for you. So you do want to put in like what it should be focusing on. You can send emails, you can make updates, you can, send them a quote on it, but you can't sign a contract, obviously. You got to say like what the parameters are. So it is like training a new employee at first, but once you train it, it just works 24/7. And then also you can obviously duplicate it, right? So it's pretty cool what it can do.
That's interesting. Yeah. And for you folks at home, that's, really the differentiation here. We started today's conversation talking 1.0 versus 2.0, where this has gone, where it possibly is going to be. If I were to make it, as simplified as possible, what I would say is before we had employee A, we'll call him Simon. And Simon was trained to do tasks A through D. That was the extent of Simon's capabilities and what he was able to do at that time. Now, Simon has additional coding in place. He's coded to have different pieces of tonality. He's coded to respond to specific service vectors, industries, related type speech. He's able to grab different information. There's just so many more capabilities, as Bryan mentioned, different parameters. So that's what I want to kind of dive into next for this. So, as if I was putting myself outside of this podcast room and I was listening from home, these additional parameters that are set, that's what kind of makes it interesting in terms of how long is this going to take, right? We had that initial 1.0. There was, kind of a limited setup, limited capabilities, seemed pretty straightforward. There's so much customization that we can put into this today. So I guess it's going to probably vary from org to org.
And I can go into detail as well if you like on that.
Yeah.
So essentially, right now, the way that Salesforce built this is that it's not that it has no training, right? So you actually can go in there and it has essentially pre-built skills, which is basically kind of its knowledge of how to handle various interactions. So it's almost like if you're hiring an employee, and let's say it went to got a certain certification, it has that skill set already out of the bat. So for a lot of small businesses, this is going to be great, right? That it can do like these simple email responses. It can fulfill these maybe different kind of questions it might have and then send it back out just looking at your org. And then that's going to be relatively efficient, right? Because you already got that built in there. You have to kind of go in and just enable it and basically say, yes, I want to do these parameters and I want it to be able to send these responses out and use this tone like you're saying. Now, you can get a little bit more, and this again is like an employee where you're kind of training them what they should be doing. If you have a larger organization where there's going to be a lot of different maybe approvals it needs to get, maybe different specific knowledge it should know, that's going to be a little bit longer. Because what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to document that knowledge. Even larger organizations, a lot of it is tribal knowledge. So you want to document it, and that's even for all your team, right? But then the AI can actually utilize that and read it and use that for your organization. So some of it honestly is going to be just getting that in writing somewhere, and then the AI can use it. So you really, if you're a small business, can start right away almost out of the bat. Larger organization, you might have a little more documentation to put into the AI, and then you can go from there. But either way, you're going to get a nice advantage.
What it comes down to there is, the initial setup process. So let's talk a little bit more about that. What I do understand today is that the feedback loop in place, it's a user-friendly interface. But are these folks beholden to a company like an Abelian or another implementation services partner of Salesforce post, initial implementation? Are those different iterations that their own Salesforce admin that sits in-house is able to make? Obviously that probably is going to change from org to org, but just from a general standpoint, if I wanted to make continuous iterations to this, it sounds like that would be a pretty big part of it. How does that work today?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So once you set it up, I mean, you own your org, right? So you have full access. The same way that we configure it is the same access you would have as an admin. There's other software companies, and Salesforce doesn't do this, but it's like where they basically lock it almost, where you need to go through them no matter what. And they'll charge you a fee, even if they're not really doing anything, they're just providing you access, which we never do. We don't own your data. Salesforce doesn't own your data. You have full capabilities to configure it and update it. Especially too in our end, like we really believe in empowerment. We want to add value to your team and to your company. So when we do that, we actually train your team as well, or your admin, how to make those easy updates. We're happy to also do that on our own, but we want to make sure you're aware of it and never feel like you don't have that knowledge. So we make sure you have that piece.
So what you're saying is you're going to teach them all the fish.
Exactly. Yes. We want to have you be stronger too. Yeah.
So, and I know this from personally being at Abelian, a big part of most of the partnerships that we enter, there's a very large training aspect associated with that. And that's what Bryan's referring to here. Interesting. So we've talked a little bit about pre-built skills library, things that are going to come out of the box, different customizations, things that you would want to do, different iterations on the road after that initial implementation and what that kind of looks like. I think the $1 million question on everyone's minds is, wow, this all sounds amazing, but what is it going to cost my business and my org? Mm-hmm. For the small businesses out there, probably a question that's looming a little bit, larger or, more at the forefront of their minds than, someone like, let's say, Samsung or an LG that we referenced earlier. Just to kind of give like a general cost outline. I know it's difficult for you to do outside the org, so I'm not going to ask you to do that.
Yeah, let me go into it for sure.
But the one thing that I do want to make sure as we do talk about cost, if you're open to it, is talking about the cost efficiency side of this. Whether I'm a smaller org or a larger org, how much money this ultimately is going to save me by putting this in place, and not just looking at it from the initial expenditure standpoint, if that's fair.
Yeah. So let me go into that part. So essentially right now, it's interesting too. So Salesforce, and I was surprised they did this, but I'm very happy they did this. They have a base version of their Agentforce basically that is free as long as you have an enterprise license, which is most organizations. So you still need someone to kind of go in there and configure it. That would be Abelian on our end, but that's included. So the BDR piece, the Salesforce kind of agent where it's kind of coaching, that's that base part of it. The core piece of it's concluded. Now, as far as like the implementation part of it, typically when we would go in there, we basically would go in to make sure that you're comfortable with what the agent can do. You want to have that capability, but you don't want it to like just assign quotes like we're saying, right? So what we do, and we go in there, and it has, for a smaller business, it has a lot of those skills already built. So we'll go in there and show you kind of this is what it can do. This is the tone that it'll have. This is match your organization. We want to make sure it's also going to your vision and branding. That's important for any employee. Typically that part of it, and this is including the like feedback and getting to see its responses and making sure the whole team's comfortable with it, probably about a month, right? Now, that's just like making sure that you're comfortable with it, you're getting the feedback, you get to test it out, see how it's doing, and kind of let it go. Kind of typical, almost like training, right? Almost you want to see how your employee's doing. Now, I would say for a larger organization, that's when you're gonna have to do all the documentation and actually get at that knowledge, right? That's because when it goes out there, you want it to actually be helpful. So if your clients, let's say for a large organization, it's very technical, they want it to be able to make sure it can do these like responses and help you, maybe something that is very detailed, you want to give it that knowledge. So probably kind of creating those processes and actually documenting it, that's going to take probably, I would assume 1, 2, 3 months, maybe if it's not all there, it's a more tribal knowledge. So to be clear, it's not something that's like we're straight working every hour of that, but just from what I know about organizations and what it takes to actually kind of test it out, everyone get comfortable, agree, document it, probably it's going to be around that range, honestly, as you kind of.
If I'm thinking about this, from kind of both different sides, as we talked about earlier, if I'm a business owner, I love it, right? I'm able to be more efficient with spending. I'm able to be more efficient with headcount and the different tasks that, they basically are tasked with. But at the same time, what I'm also looking at here is all the different areas that this applies to. Earlier we talked about customer service. We talked about sales and lead nurturing. We talked about the marketing side of it. We talked about just even visualization in terms of data analysis and reporting, which, as we know, applies to virtually every team in existence out there. I mean, who doesn't want to look at a data point to be able to look at different performance statistics, to be able to understand where they currently stand and where they want to go, right? It's pretty standard procedure there. I'd love to hear some more real-world applications and use cases. And before you get started there, I know this is relatively new. This is on the heels of, January 2025 of the Agentforce 2.0 release. So we're about a couple months in here. We're right on the cutting edge of it. So with that said, probably not as many use cases or case studies that we can reference for that, that have happened over the last 2 months here. But, just kind of AI or Agentforce in general, or maybe even some of your experience that you can speak to with implementing different Einstein modules that were also AI type applications. Just something for our viewers to kind of chew on here of what they can expect from a partnership with Abelian.
Yeah, honestly, I want to kind of go directly into something here. So really now you're kind of at the start of AI, right? It's really happening now, finally. So what I really see this as is kind of like the equalizer of businesses. Here's what could have happened. Honestly, you could have had AI and you could have had it maybe just for major corporations like Microsoft, Fortune 500, whatever it is, right? And what would happen is that basically their cost for a lot of things would go down to almost zero. That would basically mean that almost no business is going to compete with them, right? So what's great happening right now and what's happening with Salesforce is that they're bringing us to all businesses. You pay for AI basically based on a license per cost a part of it. So if you only have, let's say, you have a small use for it, you're not paying astronomical prices. So actually what this really does is it equalizes where a small business can compete against a Microsoft, right? Like you're going to find a specialty and you're going to do it really well as a small business. So I think everyone needs to take advantage of this, honestly. And the reason is because I want small businesses to be empowered and actually be able to compete in the marketplace. I want them to be efficient. This is how you do it. This is how you can do marketing. This is how you can do BDR and actually do those tailored emails and not have to, as a small business owner, stay up 24/7 writing them yourself or trying to hire while you're trying to manage cash flow. This is how you compete in the marketplace, honestly. Yeah.
That's a really interesting point. You don't need to be part of the special club to be able to get access to features like this. And, that special club is usually it's just cost prohibitive for smaller businesses, right? So in this case, it scales with you. Very great point there. Appreciate you bringing that up. As far as any type of, implementation considerations, when we're looking at data security and privacy, I know that, at least in the public sector, this is a concern for a lot of our different partnerships today or our different nonprofit folks out there, government, city, state, municipalities. Data security is becoming more and more important today with the amount of breaches that we're seeing in the news all the time. How does Agentforce protect against that? And if you can just kind of touch on that for a moment.
Well, as it's built on with Salesforce, right? Basically, everything still has that 256-bit encryption, and also multiple redundancies for the data centers. Okay. Now, to be honest as well, it's unlikely that you're going to have an organization where someone actually breaks the encryption. It's really more likely that someone's going to try to do social engineering, right? So the way that we protect against that, or Salesforce does, and we set it up that way, is that you always have two-factor authentication. And not only that, we actually make it so that, this is what we recommend for our clients, that you actually use the Salesforce Authenticator app. Literally, it goes on your phone, it can verify your GPS location, and then you click login, and it's like a verified device, and that's how you can do it. Text message, email, as for two-factor verification is pretty strong, but this is how you kind of like make sure for really sensitive data, social security numbers, that no one can get in. So that's what we recommend, and we set up.
That's interesting. 256-bit encryption, last time I checked, is a little bit difficult to get through. So that's comforting. It helps us all sleep a little bit easier at night. As far as just kind of the customization, integration challenges, I thought that you did a really great job of talking to that earlier in terms of, you can set, completely different visualization for different orgs, different graphics, different tonality when it comes down to the way that you want that agent to respond. number of different things to customize there. So, for those, again, listening at home, if we were to go through the laundry list of things that you can accomplish with Agentforce today, it would just be not beneficial. It would just be too much all at once. So we encourage everyone to reach out to us, info@abelian.us. Any unique questions, we want to make sure that we give you a custom tailored response that speaks exactly to your use case. So anyone that is out there raising their hand and wanting to know a little bit more about Agentforce, we're happy to answer any of those questions. And Bryan and I both manage that inbox daily. To kind of roll things up, definitely wanted to give everyone a outlet or way to reach out to us at info@abelian.us, but do want to kind of move it back over to Bryan for final thoughts, different considerations. What I'd love to close with today, Bryan, is just if you were to give me just one thing that you are so excited about when it comes down to Agentforce. This could be upcoming enhancements. It could be something that was recently released. I would like to leave our listeners with that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, essentially, you're really able to give Agentforce the task that, let's say, most of your employees don't want to do, but is really you need to do for your customers, right? So those email responses, summarizing them, actually responding back in a certain tone, being empathetic, it's actually able to do that. So sending all those out, responses back and forth. Even if someone calls in, this is a feature we didn't talk about too much, but it can actually answer those phone calls with actually a warm voice and actually search between different stores and take care of your concerns. So it's extremely powerful, and it's starting to change the world. It's very cliche because people were talking about that 5 years, but it actually is going to do it now. So yeah, I'm very excited for this.
Well, you heard it here, folks. This is likely not going to be our last discussion when it comes down to Agentforce 2.0 or who knows, 3.0, 4.0. We're excited to continue to bring the latest and greatest to you here, but I'm going to close things out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending our very first podcast here. I'd encourage you to hit that like button and that notification bell in addition to that subscribe button if you want to hear more from us. And we're looking forward to bringing you more over the next few weeks, months, years. So without further ado, thank you again, Mr. Hasler, for stopping by today, and we'll see everyone in the next cast.
Thank you so much.